What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 14. Sleepers and studs.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and my favorite stud at each position.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Oh, and good news, guys. Make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. Okay, guys, NFL Week 14. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. So my quarterback stud is Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing quarterbacks, Justin Herbert has averaged 25.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.7 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 14% owned, projected at 21.6 fantasy points here in Week 14. And he's $7,100 DraftKings salary and $1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game, with the Chargers favored by 10.5. So Justin Herbert has been on fire, scoring 29, 25, and 38 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Justin Herbert here versus the New York Giants. Now I also like Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills playing the Tampa Bay Bucks because Vegas thinks there's going to be 53.5 points scored in this game. So a high-scoring game. They have the Bills trailing by 3.5. Now, not a fantastic matchup here. The Tampa Bay Bucks are middle-of-the-pack defending opposing quarterbacks, but Josh Allen has averaged 24.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.3 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 9% owned, projected at 22.8 fantasy points here in Week 14. He's $7,800 DraftKings salary and $1,000 more on FanDuel. Now, Josh Allen is coming off of a bad game, only scored 13 fantasy points last game, but he scored 29 and 18 fantasy points the games before that. And the last 2 games, he had 6 and 8 rush attempts. So it's nice to have that rushing floor in a high-scoring game here. So I like Josh Allen here versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. Now, for only $200 more on DraftKings, you could get Patrick Mahomes, which is a great play as well this week, facing a weak Las Vegas Raiders defense, who has the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Now, Patrick Mahomes, coming off of 2 poor performances in terms of fantasy production, only scoring 14 and 10 fantasy points in the last 2 games, but he scored 39 fantasy points in the game before that, so he could be due for a big bounce back game. So I also like Patrick Mahomes here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, now if we're looking for a sleeper pick here at the quarterback position, it's actually not a sleeper pick based on ownership, but if you're looking for a low salary quarterback that's got some upside, take a look at Taysom Hill from the New Orleans Saints playing the New York Jets, who have the absolute worst defense overall, and they give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Taysom Hill scored 28 fantasy points last game, and he had 11 rush attempts. So a big part of Taysom Hill, a big part of his fantasy production is those rushing yards that he's going to give you. If he's going to get 10 plus rush attempts in this game, in a good matchup. I like the odds of him hitting value here. He's projected at 20 fantasy points. He's only 5,600 DraftKings salary. He's 2,100 more on FanDuel. So I love that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43 points scored in this game, with the Saints favored by 5.5. Now, Taysom Hill is going to be about 13% owned. So I like Taysom Hill here versus the New York Jets.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. My running back stud for week 14 is Josh Jacobs from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Josh Jacobs has averaged 15.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 12.4 rush attempts per game and 4.5 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 16% owned, projected at 15.9 fantasy points here in week 14, and he's only 6,200 DraftKings salary and 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Raiders trailing by 9. Josh Jacobs has scored 24, 19, and 11 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he got 13 rush attempts and 9 pass targets in his last game, and 22 rush attempts and 4 pass targets in the game before that. So lots of volume. So I like Josh Jacobs here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, now again, this is not a sleeper pick. Sorry, I'm just kind of giving you some of the higher ownership plays, but this is a value play here at the running back position. I like Javonte Williams from the Denver Broncos playing the Detroit Lions, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. They give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Javonte Williams has scored 33 and 20 fantasy points in the last 2 games off of 23 and 14 rush attempts on top of 9 and 4 pass targets. So tons of volume last game. I expect that to continue here versus the Lions, and he's going to be about 19% owned, projected at 15.3 fantasy points here in week 14. He's only 5,900 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42 points scored in this game, with the Broncos favored by 7.5. So great matchup, and this game could be a running game script. He could get a ton of work in this one. So I like Javonte Williams here versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So my wide receiver stud is Tyler Lockett from the Seattle Seahawks playing the Houston Texans, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Tyler Lockett has averaged 15.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 8% owned. He's on the field for 89% of the snaps, projected at 15.3 fantasy points here in week 14. He's 6,700 DraftKings salary and 600 more on FanDuel. Tyler Lockett has scored 20, 13, and 19 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 8, 5, and 5 pass targets. Vegas thinks there's going to be 41.5 points scored in this game, with the Seahawks favored by 7.5. So Russell Wilson is playing pretty well now, and DK Metcalf has still been kind of hindered with that foot injury. So I think that's going to benefit Tyler Lockett. So I like Tyler Lockett here versus the Houston Texans.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Now, other studs that I like on this slate are CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, and DJ Moore. So those are my top 4 wide receivers on this slate. But now if we're going to look into a sleeper pick, finally we got an actual sleeper pick here for you. So my sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is Michael Gallup from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Washington football team, who have the 4th worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Michael Gallup has averaged 11.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 100% of the snaps. He's only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 12.3 fantasy points here in week 14. He's $5,500 DraftKings salary and $600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Cowboys favored by 4.5. So great matchup here. And Michael Gallup has scored 15, 19, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 9, 8, and 10 pass targets. So a ton of volume. So I like Michael Gallup here versus the Washington football team. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. The stud on this slate is a pretty clear-cut pick here. It's Travis Kelsey from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Travis Kelsey has averaged 16.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 84% of the snaps, going to be about 7% owned, projected at 17.8 fantasy points here in week 14. He's $7,400 DraftKings salary and $100 more on FanDuel. Travis Kelsey's coming off of a bad game, only scored 6 fantasy points last game off of 8 pass targets, but he scored 19 and 23 fantasy points the 2 games before that off of 8 and 10 pass targets. So I am expecting a huge bounce back game. So I like Travis Kelsey here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, now this is not a sleeper pick based on ownership, but he is a low salary tight end who's in a great spot here this week. So I like Gerald Everett from the Seattle Seahawks playing the Houston Texans, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Gerald Everett has averaged 7.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.4 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 8% owned, on the field for 72% of the snaps, projected at 8.7 fantasy points here in week 14. He's only $3,500 DraftKings salary, $1,300 more on FanDuel, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 41.5 points scored in this game, with the Seahawks favored by 7.5. Now, I like this pick because Gerald Everett got 6 and 9 pass targets in the last 2 games. I think that injury to DK Metcalf, where he's a little hindered, so the other pass catchers are getting some of those targets. And it's a great matchup here in a low price tag. So I like Gerald Everett here versus the Houston Texans.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.